there's one more. Oh, it's on wrong display. Ah. Okay. 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 So during the past year or so, as many of you may have experienced yourself, there has been an increasing gap between the eXist downloadable as stable version and what was already available as a development version in Prague. And this has been posing many problems to us as well, because there are lots of new features in the trunk version, which in part could be ported back to 1.4, but yeah, for most of this it would have been rather difficult. So the situation was that increasingly people explored the trunk version in production environment, which was good because we have some assurance that the core itself there works pretty well and is stable and is production ready. And the things which were not, which were still missing, which is somehow in on the surface. But anyway, if we today had the next eXist version, next stable version, what would be the things which have been changed? So first of all, there have been lots of little optimizations in the XQuery engine itself. So I did quite a few, added quite a few more rewrites, about which we can talk in a minute. Then there are lots of XQuery 3.0 features which are now in eXist as well, and which are really useful when you have to write applications. So things like higher order functions or switch case statements, try catch and all that stuff. That's new. Then under the hood we had quite some redesigns. So the structural index has been, which is eXist's most important index for resolving XPath expressions. So it has been completely rewritten, and there are quite some performance advantages of using it. In particular, if you have a query which needs to traverse a rather small subtree out of a large set of resources. Then what we also added was indexing for binary resources, so you can index PDFs and so on. Adam has already talked about the new security model, with its support for multiple realms, LDAP, Active Directory, and so on. Entire Unix style, now real Unix style security system behind it. We have access control lists, which have not been shown in action yet, but I think are a really powerful feature if you have to build a real-world application in XQuery. Then access control lists really give you the level of control you need to make your application secure, which was mostly not possible before, or at least not without using a few tricks and so on. Then we have two ways to deploy apps and to develop apps. So we have we did a lot of thinking about how we could simplify the whole application development experience. And most of this really surfaced from projects we were doing, so real projects we were doing where we saw where the problems are. Then we should also mention that the database triggers have been redesigned, the API and so on. And well, finally there will also be a new REST API, but that's still secret. That's still subject of Adam's main talk tomorrow. So learn more about that then. Sunday. Yeah. So those are all the things which would be in the new version. And well, the surprise for today is that we spent quite a lot of time yesterday to somehow package everything together which we have, and we really managed to upload at least a technical view, as we call it. So the last missing things which were there were really in the security, on the security side. The permission model was split across trunk and a branch, where Adam did his main development. And so that was really the missing part for us. But now it's in there, and we did some extensive testing on it, and we think it works perfectly well now. So it's time really to pack that release and upload it. And if you go to the eXist-db website, you'll find a new release called tech release. And yeah, so we think basically it should be the final version. If there are changes, there will be on the surface. Maybe we will change the documentation a bit because it's not, there are some inconsistent pieces. But otherwise, it should be the final version, except for bug fixes for sure, which will certainly come if you work with it. And I think after this weekend, we will branch off the current trunk into a new stable branch, and development will continue elsewhere, and we'll treat the new release as we did the last release. So there's the stable branch is where we just do bug fixes and checked, really checked improvements, and there's no cutting edge development going in there. Yeah, so you can actually download all that stuff. And I would like to use the time now to just go through some of those features, enhancements, and so on. And not talk that much with slides, but rather using concrete examples.
Do you need a chair?
Oh, it's okay. So, if you install eXist now, you'll see that when you go to the demo page, which used to, oh, why is it still the old one? Oh, guys. Okay, my version wasn't quite up to date. If you now go to the demo page, you'll see that the large list of available examples has been replaced with just a simple table, because the idea is now that you install example code through the new package repository, so it's not packaged into the core eXist anymore, but all examples are separate in extra packages. And we would like in the future to take this further and really distribute eXist just as a core install and everything additional, including probably documentation and function documentation and so on, should be distributed as application packages. So it's time to look at how those application packages can be installed. So if you click here, it takes you to the admin web client, and in there you have one. In there you have one item called package repository. Initially, your package repository, which lives inside the database, is empty because you have not installed anything. Surprise. So what you most probably will do is go to the public repo, which is a repository of available application packages running on our demo server. How it needs the network connection. So we'll just add that. Yeah, okay. So now this displays the application packages currently available on the demo server. Yeah, loading the icons takes some time here, so it's not the fastest connection right now. If you click here, where probably the icon is, you'll get a pop-up window with a little description of this application. And interesting for people just looking into new features is this eXist-db demo apps, because it contains all the little examples we previously had inside the web app directory of eXist. And if you click down there, that's the install button, it should actually start downloading the package and install it. So let's see if the network's fast enough to be this way. Yeah, it is. Okay, so now you have this eXist-db demo apps there. And if I click on this again, I now see that it has been installed, so I now have an uninstall button. And I get a URL, which should now directly lead me to the installed application. So that's my eXist-db demo package here. And there are various little examples here. So we have some basic XQuery examples, which is mostly just the stuff we previously had in the sandbox directly. But then there are also some XQuery 3.0 features, and we may want to look at those for a minute. So one of the new things in XQuery 3.0, which I think is quite useful, is this switch on values. So previously there was only a type switch, which switched on types of values, but now you also have a switch statement as you are used from other languages. So that's quite nice.
So can you just make text a little bit bigger?
The text. Okay. And actually down there's a button called Edit. So if you want to try out this little snippet, yeah, the screen is too small but those pop-ups will disappear. Yeah. So if you want to try it out, just click on the Edit button and it will copy the snippet into Excite, and in there, well, you can just hit Control Enter to have that query executed. So that's a good way for looking at those examples. So if we continue, there are just a bunch of small little goodies in XQuery 3.0, like they now have this operator, a string concatenation operator, so you don't need to write concat all the time. Then very useful as well is the try catch. So eXist always had a replacement for this, which was the function util catch. But it was not standardized, and it also was not as powerful as the try catch is. So what this general statement here does is, well, obviously if I set the variable x to hello, then casting it to an integer will give me a dynamic error. Okay, and I can now catch this error, or actually here I use the star as the error code, which means catch any errors, and I should get this formatted error message down there, which I then can pass on to the user in a formatted way. So if we try that, just to see if it works, yeah, you get this error message. The information here has been inserted by those predefined variables. They are defined by the XQuery specification. Most of them. There are some. There's the possibility to define additional variables, which are then implementation dependent. But error code and error description, I think, are standardized. Okay. So the error code itself won't tell you much, but those are the codes which are in the XQuery specification. So if you wanted, you could look it up there. But I think it's also possible to output the description of the code itself. I don't know.
I think it's value.
Yeah, okay. Value. Okay, so error value should give us the so let's see, I think error value has just okay. Now there are various variables, but the most important probably is the description, and you can use those within your error message. So for a more advanced example, well, if you write your own XQuery application or module, you often encounter a situation where you want to signal an error to the user, but without killing the query completely. So XQuery has this function called error, and this will generate an error which is on the same level as other XQuery errors, but in your own namespace. So I declare my error namespace name up there, and then I can throw it here. But previously the problem was, well, that this error was not called anywhere, so the user would get it on his browser screen with the string trace and everything else, so that's not very nice. So, but now with the try-catch functionality, you can really use error codes to signal application problems and catch them and handle them in your application. So that's really a useful addition as well. You can also try that out. And yeah, works as expected. So another very, very important addition to XQuery 3.0 are the higher order functions. And I definitely think you need something like that if you want to develop an application in XQuery. As Adam already said, in eXist there's also an evil function, but as everyone knows, evil is evil. Normally you would say avoid it if you can, but I have to admit that due to other alternatives, I'm a frequent user of util eval. Anyway, being able to use higher order functions is a very good replacement for many situations where we previously had to use evil. So if you look at this example, what does it do? Well, you define a function here, as you know it, and you want to reference that function from somewhere else in your code, but you don't want to call it immediately, but you want to be able to pass around a pointer to that function. And that's how you create a pointer to that function. So that's the literal syntax. There's also another possibility, a dynamic possibility, which we can have a look at in a minute. So I define here a variable which holds a reference to my function. And then I can call this function simply by using that reference with parentheses behind it. And then I supply my arguments as before. Then we have another feature in this little example, which is inline functions. So, as you can see here, the first argument to my function actually should be a function pointer itself. So I want this function to take a function as a parameter and call that function again. Yeah. So that's what is declared here. Now, this means if I call apply, I have to pass it a function parameter. And since I don't really need that function I'm going to pass more than once, I just inline it. So that's my inline function definition here, which does nothing else but transform every string it gets to uppercase. Yeah, so now I have a possibility, just like in other functional languages like Lisp, Scheme, and so on, pass references to functions around and use those functions, which opens a whole new world of possibilities for module writers. So previously I had to, when I wrote a general purpose module, I had to use lots of tricks to somehow get input from the module user. But now the module user can just pass me in a function, and then I can do whatever I need to, and finally pass the result back to that function or whatever I want to do. So that's really powerful. Yeah, so what does this example do? Well, basically it's just an implementation of the standard apply function, which is also part of the XQuery stack, but for the purpose of this example, I just recoded it in XQuery. So what it does is it calls apply with the function pointer and the sequence, and then applies that function to every item in the sequence and returns the value. Yeah. So I think we'll immediately see what to expect back from it. I'll just evaluate it. Yeah, hello world in uppercase. Yes, so that's named function references. But very often it's not useful to use a reference as here. Because, well, obviously here you have to know the name of the function you want to execute at compile time. And for many library modules, that's not possible. So probably you want to use it to be able to do something, let's say, inside an XML template and call a certain function from there, but you don't know in advance what that function will be. So there is another alternative in the XQuery 3.0 function specs, which is itself a function. So this is equivalent to the literal version we had up there. So function lookup will, as the name says, look up this function in the context of the module. And well, the free behind there is so-called arity. Is it pronounced arity? Yeah. Which means that x.left takes exactly 3 parameters. Yeah, so as you know, XQuery functions are, the identity of a function is defined by its name and the number of arguments it takes. So a function with 3 arguments is not the same function as one with the same name, but only 2 arguments, okay? So you always have to specify an arity when looking up a function. And then you can just use that reference as before. This example is even a bit more complex than before, but again, it's just the implementation in XQuery of a standard library function, which is available in XQuery as well. So what I can do here, well, basically it's a recursive function which applies the function it receives from left to right to the sequence and adds up values returned. So if I pass it a function which takes 2 arguments and just multiplies them, and then my start value is 1, and I want to process the sequence from 1 to 5, what will be the result? So that the screen is just
You click the wrong link.
huh?
You click the wrong link. Yeah.
Sorry. In this one. Yeah. Where is my okay, here's the Okay, so what does it do? Well, if I use the sequence from 1 to 5, I will get back, how is it called? The faculty, or, yeah, faculty of the number. Factor of the number, okay. So it multiplies each value by the next. Yeah, so those are the main new developments available in XQuery 3.0. There have been some more changes between XQuery 1.0 and 3.0 in various areas, but I think those are the major ones. There are many small changes. I forgot one, annotations. Annotations are implemented in eXist as well, but well, there are no applications for them yet, but Adam will demonstrate something on Sunday. So annotations are fully supported as well. Yeah, so those are the main new XQuery features. And if we continue working through that example app, you'll find other stuff like URL rewriting. Again, this is a real example of how to use the try catch functionality, because here what I want to do is, well, the user is supposed to enter a number, but here he enters a string, and normally that would result in a cast error, and I don't want the user to see this error. So what I do is, basically I have a try catch in the background, but it's called by the URL rewriting. So the URL rewriting detects there's an error being thrown from that page, and it automatically redirects the request to an error page, which then shows those errors, the error message, plus a stack trace. So this still looks a bit scary, but actually the stack trace down there is quite useful for finding where to look for that problem. So we need that. Okay, continuing through the demos. Special features. Well, we have added a JSON serializer. So from within an XQuery, well, you can, inside your XQuery, you can define so-called serialization options. Yeah, you can define serialization methods, and well, as everyone will expect, available methods are XML, HTML, XHTML, okay? But we just added another one, which is JSON. So the JSON serialization method will just take any XML that you use in your XQuery and transform it into JSON, which is obviously quite useful if you have to talk to a jQuery library or anything in Java, which takes once JavaScript and not XML. So in this quick example, I just used a jQuery plugin called Dynatree to print out a collection view of the DB, and my query does not have to deal with any of this. It just produces XML, and this XML is transformed on the fly to JSON. So as XQuery author, I don't really need to know much about JSON. There are some special constructs you have to use in some cases, but if you just give it a piece of XML, it uses JavaScript out of it, and that's it. Another neat feature we have here is indexing binary resources. So this is based on Apache TCA, which is able to read a wide variety of binary resources like PDFs, Word documents, Excel sheets, and all that stuff. And it's able to extract the content of those fields, of those files, and indexes them with eXist. So, well, actually, it's not, the binaries are not extracted within eXist itself, so we don't just transform them into XML, because that's usually not very efficient, and for a PDF you don't get any semantic information out of it usually. So what we do is we just extract metadata, and we extract certain full text blocks provided by Apache TK, and then create a special UC index on those parts, and that's integrated into the system. So we can try that out. I think I have not uploaded any documents yet, so we just can't do that. Also, there's a trigger defined on this binary collection here. So if I just grab a PDF file, PDF, anything PDF, oh yeah, I can't even find this. Where's my, yeah, okay, drag and drop is a bit difficult. Plus screens now. So normally I could just drag it over, but since my screens are not aligned, it's a bit difficult, I just select it. Oops. So select it here with this, there is my PDF, so let's try this. Now. Okay, so it's uploading it. And you see it just stored the PDF, so it doesn't really change anything while storing into the database. It's still a binary object. But nevertheless, I should be able to search something in there. So if it's about accounting, then we probably find something about profit. Yes? So I'm just able to search my PDF and integrate that with other XML data I have in my DB. So for a real application, it would be interesting to have, for example, the metadata as a richly marked up XML record, but still have access to the full text at the same time, and that's what the module does.
Could you show me that implying the font indexes?
Font indexes.
The index browser.
On the index browser. Yeah, sure, you can see that. But I'm not sure if my setup is a bit. Oh, there, yeah. So here you see index is defined. Well, those are not the ones. There are the binary indexes. I don't think binary indexes are here. Okay. So that was the demo app. And now, well, the next question should be, how can I develop XQuery apps like this one? And there has been quite some progress on this as well. Because eXist now has this package repository, and applications in there are stored in a well, must have a certain format, which is the same one as used in eXpath. So it's this those eXpath packages always called .xar and constitute. Yeah, so let's start from the beginning. eXpath packages themselves are an effort to standardize XQuery extension modules across implementations. So what eXpath deals with is distributing library modules which could be XQuery modules, XSLT style sheets, or just Java code across implementations as self-contained packages. So the idea is that you package your XQuery module into a XAR package, hand it over to an XQuery engine, and the XQuery engine installs it and is then able to use the functions defined in here. Okay? But what the eXpath packages don't do is, well, treat all the rest of the application somehow. So you can't tell it, well, I need to install this data for my application. Those are my main XQuery scripts. Those are my controller scripts. This is my index configuration. That's all not possible with the standard eXpath packaging. So what we did was extend those eXpath packages by basically just adding another XML descriptor which contains all the information we need for hot deployable applications. yeah, and that was also the goal, to make it possible to deploy entire applications or services with their entire interface and index configurations and so on in one single application archive, so users can just click somewhere and download it and install it. And basically that's what happened in the background when I installed this demo apps package. Yeah? So it's just for the user in the end, it's just means going to the admin page over here, go to the public repo, but you can also use your own repository or you can upload local resources, local packages. And then you click here, for example, if I want to have this one again, button to install, connection is too slow to see that. Yeah, I don't get the icons, so I can't click them. It needs to contact it. But you can also upload them locally. So if you, instead of just going to the server, you take them from your own eXist. We have some examples in here in repo packages. So I could choose this mobile documentation thing. Upload it, and then it has created. Now my app is installed, and if I click here, say I go there, and well, this is just a version of the eXist-db function documentation for formatted for phones. So that's using jQuery mobile, pretty simple module, but it demonstrates how to create and how an app could look like. So yeah, there are two ways to install applications. One way would be through web admin client, we saw that. Another way is to just upload a XR package through eXist, and it automatically recognizes that this is an application and starts to install it. And we'll talk about the other things as well. So now, what if I want to write my own application just in XQuery? And it should be deployable as easy as the other examples I showed. So then eXist comes into the game. Within eXist, if you launch it, there's this menu application above here. So now let's say I just want to start a new application, and you can here choose, you can make a choice from two available templates which control how your application will be structured later on. And for to make it easy, I'm just choosing HTML templates, which gives me some support for producing HTML, so I don't need to write that much. So I'll just create one called test. I have to give it a URI as name, like needs to be more test, application test, So then let's just click on install. So now it said I clicked on done, nothing happened, so what's up? That's not a bug, it's just how it behaves. So it has generated an application in the background, but I have not opened any of the files in that application, so I can't see it. But in my DB view, I now have this collection test, and as you can see, there's already a bunch of files in that collection. Those have been automatically generated by when I click on done. So eXist for you creates the basic structure of an application, and it's already possible without changing anything to run this. So I'm just opening the index.html because that's probably my start page. So I open that, and if I click on application run app source, then I click on here. I have my application. So that's what has already been generated. That's just the entry page into my app, and my user generated stuff, and put in my own code. So if you look at this a little bit, you'll see that this index HTML page is pretty basic. So there's not much in it. Actually, there's just a div, and I have a heading, and then some strange class names, and that's it. But if I run the application, what happens is that it suddenly looks like this. So I get all this Rome around it, so this web design and stuff, and the eXist-db logo, and the menu there. I get all this into my page. So some magic had to be going on. And this magic is done by the HTML templating, which has been installed with that app when you selected HTML templating as a type of your generated application. So the templating itself is quite simple. It's actually just one XQuery module. Two sources available as well in here. So if you go to modules, then you will see the source of it. And it is a templating module which has a templating approach which has been mainly inspired by ideas I got from Scala, Lift in particular. So the idea was that I really would like to make it possible for XQuery authors to write valid HTML without putting any XQuery code in between your HTML. So it should just be HTML. So you should have a separation of concerns. And your web designer, whoever is working with HTML, just sees HTML and does not need to deal with XQuery. So without this approach, many applications I have seen directly mix XQuery and HTML. So you have loads of XQuery functions which generate some HTML fragment. And the disadvantage there just is that by looking at this code, it's very hard to figure out how the final HTML would look like. So it's also hard to make changes. If you make a change, then you basically have to run it to see what the output is. And so I pretty much like a clean separation of concerns. And how is this achieved here? Well, what we are using to trigger the templating is just standard HTML class attributes. So the difference to a normal class attribute is that they always start here with some namespace prefix. Okay? And what happens internally is that the templating engine reads this, sees that this could be a templating command, and tries to map this to an XQuery function it knows. Okay? So basically all those like templates load source or templates around, they're just matched on XQuery functions. So if you look at this app test thing, for example, you'll see that app test itself is nothing but an XQuery function which needs to have a certain signature for it to be found by the system, but otherwise it's just an ordinary XQuery function, and the templating automatically finds out how to apply this function to the input. So the parameters it takes is node is the HTML node. I'm trying to expand. Params can be optional parameters which are passed into the class name. And model is any user-defined data you want to pass between different templates. Okay. So yeah, that's basically the templating. And if you look at the templating module itself, it has the rise functions ready there to be used. So like the ones we had there were, where is it, surround, which in this case template surround with. It's just that it takes this div, looks up another HTML file which contains general HTML for my site and puts that div into there and merges the two and sends it back. That's all. So the advantage of writing your app in this way is that it's relatively, I'm writing HTML here, but it looks clean, so I can even write longer pieces of HTML. Oops, wrong button. I can even write longer pieces of HTML without looking too bad. So if I go back to the examples, I said my XQuery 3.0 examples look like this, and I have some special templates into here, like templates display source, which automatically takes this code block, adds syntax highlighting to it, and adds that little edit button to the bottom, so where you can press and then get to decide to edit it. So that's all done by the templating, and I don't need to deal with it in my HTML. So I can really write quite a lot of HTML without it getting messy or anything. So it's one of the advantages. But certainly for real applications, you would have more transformation steps in between. Yeah, okay, so I just filled out that form, and eXist for me generated an application archive. It's also possible to directly download the generated archive. So if I click on the download app, it will package my, I'm in the wrong file, but oops. So it packages a XOR file for me, which I could just download here, give it to my, give it to someone else, and he could easily install it with a few clicks. So, where are we time-wise? Almost there. Okay. I mean, I could do some more examples on this and show you how to actually write some code if you want to. Or we could, yeah, maybe just a little example. Let's say I want to do something real with this code. So I'm going to add some resources. Add another collection called data. Then let's just upload one or two XML files that we want to have. Maybe some Shakespeare in TI. Let's choose Hamlet, for example. More. Upload this. It's uploading my data now. Then normally I would need to have an XQuery which transforms my stuff, but I think I already have that prepared. So I'll just use the one which is prepared. Model. So that's my key to HTML. Let's see. Okay, so that's one piece of XQuery which does recursive transformation on my TI. So my documents. My documents in here now, Hamlet, yeah. Hamlet looks like this. So that's a TI document. And the main interesting part is down there. So I have speech elements, speakers, and I have lines. Okay, so I now already have my module that should be able to transform those nodes. And let's say I want to my index HTML page instead of showing anything here. I just want it to output. Let's restrict it to Hamlet now. I just want it to output one file, and that's it. So I'm just changing that. I call one single template from here, which will contain my main code. I go to my app.xql, where all my templates live, and create a new one. So there it is. Display. Let's see. Let's see. So I now already have my module that should be able to transform those nodes. And let's say I want to my index HTML page instead of display And then, okay, I have to import my module. Press F4. So where is it? Here it is. Import. So I'm just going to output that. Let's say that data is doc. So I need another import here which has the global configuration for my app. This one. Like this. So now I have a variable called attribute. And I want Hamlet, so I have to restrict that to Hamlet. So I think this one just slash.
You should use the new XQuery fix.
Huh?
You should use.
Yeah, okay, I could here. So I'm just getting the data, and then all I have to do is to call my TI to and pass it my data, and then one more in here is for concurrent as this. On concurrent, let's see another. No namespace assigned. Let's see the. I have here my one level. Let's get it here. Namespace is missing. There, namespace, TI. That's it. Let's check again. Now it should be okay. Let's save it, and then I'm just going back to my generator page and see what it does. Ooh, nothing. That was not unexpected. I'm missing data collection here. Yeah, and here's my Hamlet format within HTML. Yeah, so far so good.
The last demo was a very fast demonstration of the new Excite XML language we have before. It's very impressive. And so new stuff as well. I would like to suggest, thank you Wolfgang for your presentation. Are there any questions for him right now, or do you have sufficient time to have additional questions after coffee break? Chris?
Group by was already supported, was it? Or?
Yes, it is supported, but it needs to be adopted to the official specs, because we had that since quite a while, and the syntax is not exactly what it looks like in the spec. There are also semantic differences.
Yes, but they will be aligned. So.
Right.
Come back.
Yeah, what happens with the templating when the class is not found?
Right now it would just be ignored, so nothing happens. If you look at your HTML later on, you will still see the div with the class, and it has not been expanded, and you'll see that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. You could also throw an error, but
No, I think
more
it's
useful.
better because
yeah.
there might be another processing step. So
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's have a break of 15 minutes.